Ladies and gentlemen, today is May 21st, 2019, and this is the King Kale Show, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Kienan Lafferty, and I would like to welcome you back to another show, and I would like to welcome myself back after a long hiatus. Today we're going to be jumping into, of course, the beautiful Ashar animation that I'm sure you guys have been checking out. I just uploaded it yesterday, and as promised, I wanted to create a video today to show you about my process and how you at home can get similar effects like this, but most importantly, we're going to be dissecting everything that went into this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. And by the way, if you would like to, you can download today's PSDs and follow along. I highly recommend you do. Drop it into Photoshop. And let me show you how to load up this little tool down here called the timeline, so that way you too can watch it animate like this. So when you first open the file, of course, it'll just be like this. And I was hitting spacebar to begin playing it, but unless you have open timeline, it tends to not work. So what you want to do first is just go up to Window, and then go ahead and drop down to Timeline. Okay, go ahead and click that. And then you'll see you got your little timeline. Might be a little zoomed out. So right down here is your little zoom in, zoom out tools. So go ahead and click those to make the timeline larger and smaller. And you'll see there's all these groups. Don't worry, we're going to get to these in just a moment. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But make sure that you're zoomed in. You can move. You can go ahead and scrub back and forth. If your computer is having a little bit of trouble playing it, then I suggest you go to this little gear right here. Click on this gear. Resolution, go ahead and set that to 50 or even 25%. What it's going to do is just going to lower the resolution while it's playing, therefore make it a little bit easier on your CPU. All right, with all that out of the way, now that you know how to make it animate for yourself, let's go ahead and begin dissecting all of the many layers, and let me talk about the story that went into making this, okay? So let's go ahead and begin from the very beginning, okay? So let's go ahead and jump into these early sketches. I'm probably going to be saving these sketches for another tutorial for how I actually put these together, but in essence, what you want to make sure that you're doing is you want to make sure that you have a general idea of what your character is going to look like, okay? So I have done sketches of Ashar before on the earlier K and Kale shows. In fact, you can go back and see one of the earlier ones that was done with vivid color. But I knew the kind of general gist of the design of the character, but I wanted to refine it into a specific style that would be good for animation. And for animation, you need to be thinking simple. Simple, 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 because these lines are going to have to be drawn more times than I would like to admit. More time. It's going to drive you a little bit crazy if your character is too detailed. So you can see through here, a lot of my mind was working towards thinking of how do I condense this hair instead of like drawing hair like this, you know, with like tons of little strands going through it, all that stuff. How about we just reduce that to just simple lines like this, right? Simple lines that are going to be easy to animate, specifically parts that are going to be moving. You can get a little bit more detailed. See, this is one of the things that you can kind of cheat a little bit, but it's still good to keep in mind. All of the areas that will not be moving, such as her face here, you can see that, let's go ahead and take these off. All of this animation, this blue, it basically represents lines that will not move throughout the entire animation, or this animation specifically, so we can get a little bit more detailed. But for things like the hair, all these hair pieces and the little leaves that are on her chest that are moving, I wanted to make sure to keep those as simple as possible line-wise. So definitely something you want to keep in mind. Okay, so moving forward, I had this general idea that I wanted Ashar to be sort of grabbing her shoulder, just this kind of simple pose, and then this hair just majestically flowing in the wind, much like Pocahontas. I referenced the exact scene from Pocahontas, Disney's Pocahontas, where John Smith meets her and her hair is blowing so elegantly and majestically through the wind. Because, as I've taught you before, whenever you want something to look good, you want to steal it. So look at how the back of the hair, it moves like this flag type thing, and it has like mixtures of like flamey properties to it. I got that from Pocahontas, so I highly recommend you guys go check out that scene. Compare it for yourself. See, you can see just how much I actually took from that. So yeah, I'm not a master animator by any means. I always look to the masters myself for when I'm trying to get more ideas, especially how to do things well. Okay, so then jumping ahead a little bit, just because I want to show you guys where this is going to go to, once you get clean line art, then you're ready to start adding in color. And when you have clean line art, it makes coloring all the more easy. It makes it all the more easy for this type of thing. And then, as you can see, it's just animating so beautifully. And I'll go into how we're going to do the background. Background was super, well, it's super easy the way that I like to do them. I like to use gradient maps, but again, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and just jump back to the sketch, okay? So, the story so far, we've got this thing done, and we are moving into the actual animation part, okay? So now that we've got the general pose down, I want to show you guys how I actually built up even just this beginning sketch. So let's jump into this old folder, golden oldie folder. You can see here is the sketch of how it just gets started, and then refinement, just mega early sketches. I really like showing this part of my process because I want you guys to see how like messy my lines are and how I go about cleaning them up by kind of erasing. You guys have seen my style before, how I go in and I'll like basically like erase and kind of sculpt lines into place like that. It's basically a lot of laying down paint and kind of taking it away, which is actually kind of similar to oil painting. I actually had the chance to try out oil painting for the first time. I was visiting Seattle. One of my friends there, he's a great oil painter, and he taught me how to properly kind of do some oil paints. So I realized, wow, it's actually, the way that I digital paint is kind of like oil painting, laying paint down and then kind of taking it away. So anyway, continuing, we got to this point here, and I was really happy with this sketch. I was feeling good about it. And then I decided to clean that up. And, of course, I made my notes, very similar to what I was saying before. These are all the parts of the piece, all the parts of the actual sketch that are going to be moving. So I want to make sure to keep those on separate layers. Okay, but then we run into another issue. And that is, if this hair is going to be moving, and let me see if the best way that I can describe this. This hair in the front is moving, right? But we need to have something behind it, right? Because we can't just have it move and then have like nothing there, like scalp there. We need to actually have like hair. And we need to have like, in this case, the horn. So we need to actually draw things, and we need to keep in mind that things are happening behind this. So let me go ahead and show you how I began. Well, before we get into that, actually, I want to show you guys the lines. I want to show you guys the line art. So here is the actual line art, and I'm going to show you guys the, like basically the brush that I like to use. I've got two ink brushes. One is like this. One is just a straight up kind of hard round brush. See, very simple, just straight up hard round brush, full opacity. And yeah, it's full opacity, and yeah, that's the most important thing. The second thing is sort of like this kind of more squared off ink brush. I find that this tends to give your lines a little bit more life. However, it's not quite as consistent, but I wanted to be a little adventurous. I'm still learning a lot about inking, so I did stuff with this line 2 brush. I like it. It's kind of calligraphy looking. But most importantly, I used the tool called Lazy Nezumi, okay? I know Photoshop has its own smoothing tool, but I found for the all-time low price of $20 to $30, I forget what it is, but Lazy Nezumi is really awesome, and let me show you why. So I have my own smoothing setup right here. It comes with a bunch of really awesome preset smoothing features. The one that this is most similar to, if you end up buying it, is called Pulled String. I basically made a version of Pulled String for myself. Now let me show you what this does. See how it kind of makes that, like I can draw a straight line, and even if I jiggle, see how it just kind of averages that out? It's because I'm pulling a string. So you can figure, as I'm going through here and drawing this hair, see how much easier it is to get those smooth lines with that pulled string mode? Oh, it absolutely saved my life. Thank you to my girlfriend who constantly suggested this. And I was like, I don't need that crap. I don't need that for line art. I can just turn this off and I can get in there. I know how to do line art, right? It's like this. I can just draw it fast. Oh, okay, I just got to do it faster. Ugh. So you sit here for hours, right, with your hand on Control Z. And by the way, if you ever want to be an animator, get used to this already, or doing any sort of line art, your fingers are going to live on Control Z because you're going to be doing this and this a lot. But see how much I feel like Lazy Nezumi gives you so much more control. And you can be a little bit more slower and methodical with it. And it just automatically gives you that nice, clean, smooth, perfectly smooth line. Buttery smooth. We love that. Go pick up Lazy Nezumi today. This video is not sponsored by them, but I just love them so much, so you got to go get it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move that out of the way. Let's move back to what we were talking about before, and that is, yes, moving from line art and going over to color. Color. In fact, let's go ahead and take off the background because we don't want to get distracted by that just yet. We want to talk about the layers. We want to talk about the layers and all of the goodies that went into this. Let's go ahead and zoom out this timeline a little bit. Let's talk about how this hair actually works. So you can see the way that I set this up is the lines are animating, right? But the color is also animating. See how if I take away the lines, there's still color layers there that are animating. So basically, each of these folders, if you choose to download this PSD, you can go ahead and go through it for yourself. Each of these colors, there's line, and I've handily named them. How about that? Doing animation forced me to start being more organized with my layers. But see, this is what I'm talking about. See, you have to start thinking about what is behind that hair, because as the hair moves, see how it covers the horn for just a moment here? I'm actually going to set this to 100% just so it stays nice resolution as we are zooming in and out of it. Actually, I think that's good enough. Yeah, that's good enough. So see how the hair gets covered, but then it gets revealed again. So you need to make sure that anything that is moving, you have something behind it. So you can see here, I sketched in just Ashar's basic hairline. So that way there's actually something there. Oh, and here's a good way for you to see what's happening. So see the lines are going over top of it. There's things that are moving, but there's of course horns and hair there for it to kind of parallax over top of, or actually move on top of. Same thing with the horns. And what else did we need? Oh yeah, drawing in the ears. Just make sure that you have those layers behind there. Moving on. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is, oh yeah, same thing with the leaves on her chest. So let's go ahead and get rid of the lines of the leaves, and let's get rid of the color of the leaves. See, she has that little kind of covering there. Just a nice darker color. Keep in mind it's also a darker color because contrast is also very important with allowing things to read properly. See how the back hair is nice and dark, giving great contrast to the hand, allowing her body and everything to just pop out straight at your face, and it feels good. All right, feels very good. So let's take away the leaves. Let's see, what else are we missing here? The eyes. Yeah, so you can see here, this is basically the animation of the eyes without the lines. It's amazing how much the lines add to, you saw that it just basically disappeared. That's because there was nothing but the lines there. But you can see the eyes are moving quite nicely. Scrubbing back and forth, feeling good, feeling fine. Let's go ahead and get rid of the eyes. Let's get rid of the eyes. Boom, no more eyes. And now we're getting closer to what I said. Look, see how none of this, all of this is just like one still asset. So we can get away with a little bit more detail here. If this body was moving all on itself, I'm sure that I'll discover this as I start doing more animation. I might even need to refine and simplify this even further. So let's go ahead and go to the hair. Let me show you guys what is actually going on with the hair. The hair is actually, whoa, look at that. It's like straight up masked out. It even has a part where it kind of like pops like that. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but luckily, oh no, it's not that big of a deal because this is technically behind everything. So you can see the hair is on its own asset. So making sure that as you do this, you want to be keeping in mind the layers of animation, things that you'll need to create as assets. That way they are layering on top of one another. And then lastly, having your lines, like animating your lines first, getting your clean line art first, like this, and then going back in and adding color. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and set this back to 50%. That way it can actually load and not die. There we go. So there you go. Now you have yourselves some nice line art, and then you can drop that color on there. Boom, drop the color on. And now we want to move into a little bit of the post-process. Or should we do post-process? No, let's not do post-process yet. We're going to move into backgrounds. We're going to move into backgrounds. So let's go ahead and collapse this entire just so handily organized folder. I'm very proud of myself because I never organize my layers. but this project made me have to. And let's go ahead and go into the background, okay? The background was actually a ton of fun to do, and it's very easy to do. I'm gonna show you how I went about doing it, how you can do it yourself. Okay, so here is, I'm just gonna turn on all these layers and we're gonna dissect it one by one, basically drop it down to where it began, and then build it all the way back up. So the first thing that really comes in handy for backgrounds, if you don't want to spend too much time, is blur it, okay? And that is, of course, done by going to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I like to use this one. You can blur the heck out of the thing, or you can just add a little bit to it, right? Helps to kind of mitigate some of the sloppiness that may have been in the background, because when it's all perfectly sharp, you know, people can really start to get in there and really critique it and analyze your brush strokes, and you might not be ready for them to do that. So play it safe, use the Gaussian blur. Okay, moving back, we are going to talk about different layers and adding colors to what was originally a gradient map. And you can see, well, you might be asking, first of all, what is a gradient map? A gradient map is something that takes a black and white image and then it just basically does all the work for you. It just adds color onto it. And let me show you how it does that, okay? So this is how I started the background. I started with it black and white, and then I add what's called a gradient map. And the way that you do that is, let's say that you just finished a black and white picture like this. You go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then you go to Gradient Map, okay? And then you hit OK. And then it's gonna probably look like that, okay? And then what you wanna do is make sure that you, well, actually, is that already working? Yeah, I guess it's working just fine. Okay, so the way the gradient map works is you open it up like this. You click on this little gradient. Now, basically, anything that's on the left represents your dark values. So let's say you wanted your dark values to be pink, right? And then everything on the right represents your light values. And let's say that you wanted your light values to be turquoise, peach, or no. What is that? Teal? Whatever. It's teal. And then you can add colors all in between. So you can start to come up with cool little mixtures. See how it kind of goes from this blue to this red? You start getting cool mixtures of like your lights and shadows, and that's basically pulling data from the dark and light values of your piece. So you can see that's basically all we did. That's all we did. We just slapped that on there. We wanted a nice volcanic, warm palette, but you can see the colors that I used. I actually pulled the dark values towards this light blue, and that's how we're getting this really cool desaturation on these dark rocks right here. Love doing that. But yeah, you can experiment with all these different types of sliders. Oh yeah, the other cool thing is moving the slider around will begin to pull more of that color into the dark values. So you can kind of find a lighting scheme that works for you. Okay, isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome, guys? I love this. This is just the coolest thing for making a background. It saves me so much time, makes me look awesome, and it actually requires little to no skill. So, which is the most important part. So moving on. The next thing that I did was I said, oh, I really like that desaturated. Well, let's go ahead and eyedrop this. So we have these reds, and then we have this desaturated color, this desaturated blue that we're working with. I was like, I love what that is doing. I want to add that back into I want to add more of those desaturated colors into the piece. This is me just painting over top of everything. And then eventually we get to this point. And I say, okay, this is all fine and good, but with Ashar on there, I feel like, you know, she has like these cooler colors in there. I want some cooler colors and maybe some purples to balance this piece out. So what did I do? I duplicated this layer. Let me just go ahead and turn off this layer mask. I duplicated the layer, and then I think I just like hue shifted it. I think I just went into hue and just hue shifted it over to like purple and desaturated it and like messed around with the brightness contrast, all to basically make this image. And then what I did was I added on a mask, and that's done just by clicking this special button right down here. It looks like the description of a portal from Stranger Things. The guy pokes the hole through the plate right there, except in this case it's like a, I don't know, a 3x5 card. It's that button right there, all the way at the bottom right. That creates a mask, and that allows you to basically you paint black. Wherever you paint black gets rid of the mask. See, I can paint it away and it shows what is behind it, right? The red. But then as I paint white, it brings that mask back into, or brings the colors back in. So now you can start to play around with these two kind of color schemes, put in cool colors where you want them, and then erase to get more reds. Okay, that's basically how I did that. Let's go ahead and enable that back. And then of course the last thing I did was the Gaussian blur. But going all the way back here, there was some more. There was some more that I wanted to show because I added different levels of detail. So this was the beginning. This is just getting my general kind of feeling for the composition. Again, I'm not a super amazing background artist like some people that I worked with, but I can make it through with a little bit of help from the gradient maps. So we got to this point, clean it all up, add those colors in there, those contrasting cool colors, and that makes Ashar look fine and dandy. Oh yeah, and then the Gaussian blur also really helps to pull the character because the character is super sharp versus the blurred background. So it really helps us to focus on the character. Lastly, let's go ahead and get into the post-process. Yay, post-process. What is post-process? Well, of course, post-process is how we make things look really nice, similar to anime. I've been watching a lot of anime, specifically My Hero Academia lately, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, both amazing animes. And I've been picking apart just little things that they'll do with like the shading. I'm like, how do they animate something, but then have that gradient on it? How are they actually doing that? And so if you go in here, you can find out for yourself. So take a look here. Remember how I said the color is on its own layer? Well, did you know that you can create a clipping mask? See this layer 173? This is a clipping mask. And if I take it away, look at this. It's actually a gradient that I've clipped back to that entire folder, which is the animation. So when you do that, it allows the animation to have a gradient. So you don't have to go through and gradient all of the colors, right? You can go through and basically pick the color and then clip it back to those layers. Same thing is happening here. That gradient on this hair. That is done on, that would be hair back. See how that layer is right there? Boom, layer 172. Oh yeah, we love those gradients. Gradients are very nice. Of course, the other style of animating shadows or creating a little bit more depth with shadows to your piece is actually animating your shadows, but by this time I was already going so crazy that I didn't have time nor the interest to do animated shadows. And my hats are off even more to anime artists and animators alike who have to take the time to animate those shadows. But the last thing that I wanted to tell you about, and this is more done in the final image, can you see how there's like this kind of, what is the word? Like a dreamy kind of glow effect that's on the entire piece that really makes it feel much more cinematic. And of course the embers, but that was all done in After Effects. Again, completely separate tutorial for a different time. But regardless, you can see particularly around the eyes how there's this very bright kind of glow and all of the colors seem to begin mixing with each other and the background just feels so nice and happy and the colors, everything just feels nice. How do you do that? Well, the way that you do it is like this. Basically, it's just taking a layer, taking the complete layer, and in this case, I did it in After Effects, but I'll show you how to do it for your own pieces. It's the same principle that applies. Basically what you're doing is you're duplicating that footage, or in this case, the piece, right? So let's, I just did Shift-Control-Alt-E to flatten it, right? I created a flat stamp of this image. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna visit our old friend Gaussian Blur. Let's go to Gaussian Blur and let's go ahead and set it to, I don't know, maybe like, maybe 10 pixels. Hit OK. And then what you're going to go to is you're going to go to your layer styles and you're going to go to, I think I used hard light, maybe? Hard light? I think I used hard light. See, but the problem is that hard light by itself, yeah, it kind of like makes the colors look more interesting and begin blending together, but it's like oversaturated. So what do we do? Well, there's a couple things you can do. First thing you can do is lower the opacity to 75%. Then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to adjustments, brightness, contrast. Let's go ahead and lighten it up a little bit. Let's go ahead and drop the contrast. Let's go ahead and brighten it up. So we have a similar, right? We're looking for a similar kind of value range that we had before, right? Which is, this is feeling pretty good. But then lastly, you want to hit Control U and let's go ahead and drop down the saturation. You don't want it too bright, right? Too much looks like a terrible, looks like a bad trip, okay? And you want to go ahead and drop down your saturation to about there. See, so now you have a nice little post-processing effect that really brings everything together. It looks so dreamy and beautiful. And that was done, of course, in After Effects by duplicating that footage and then doing all those same tweaks to it, the brightness, contrast. the hue saturation, and then setting that footage to hard light and dropping the opacity itself to 75%. And that gives us this. It takes us from this to this, from this to this, to final anime, beautiful, dreamy sequence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create an animated piece. That is how you create an animated dragon girl named Ashar. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun. I'd like to thank you all for welcoming me back after my hiatus. I truly have missed you guys. Although the time that I have spent over the last few months has been very good for me. I've been needing to take some time for myself, and along the way, I've realized some very important things, things that truly make me happy, and that is doing my art, doing the show, expressing myself, and I want to get back to doing this full time. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. As I have said before and many other times, you can download the PSD if you would like to go through all of this yourself. The links are also down in the description. Thank you guys so much. The last thing that I want to leave you with is, for those of you who saw the video on YouTube, well, actually, less about that. More importantly, the people who have been doing the Cane Kale redraw on Instagram, I wanted to say thank you so much. And along those lines, I totally closed it down. So let me sneakily pull that up before we go away. There we go. A lot of you have been drawing Ashar for yourselves, and I wanted to say thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to end the show with this. And, of course, the music to take us out. Ashar's music, take us out. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Take care.